Oh my God, look at this. Any last hope of warning Washington depends on this flight.
But I fear Raven knows the entire itinerary.
Diplomat's plane shot down in 1940. 84 years later, divers found it with classified documents intact. Dr. Maria Korhonen descended through the murky Baltic waters at 0800 on Tuesday morning, her underwater ROV's lights cutting through 230 feet of darkness toward the wreckage that had been hidden for 84 years. In 30 minutes, when her cameras revealed the intact diplomatic pouches still sealed in Kaleva's cargo hold, the most dangerous secrets of World War II would finally surface. Maria, 45, appears to be exactly what her credentials suggest, a marine archaeologist investigating historical aircraft wrecks for Estonia's National Heritage Board. But beneath her academic research lies a woman whose discovery of American diplomat Henry Anthal's classified documents will expose intelligence operations that powerful forces are still killing to protect. What happened in the Baltic depths would prove that some diplomatic secrets never die. They just wait for the right moment to destroy those who buried them. The Baltic Sea, off Estonia's coast, cold, deep waters where the wreckage of Kaleva, the Finnish passenger plane shot down by Soviet fighters on June 14, 1940, has remained hidden at 230 feet depth. The remote location near Carey Island provided perfect concealment for classified documents that international powers hoped would never resurface from their watery grave. Recent advances in underwater exploration technology have enabled Estonian diving companies to locate historical wrecks that previous searches couldn't find, including military vessels and aircraft from World War II, whose contents remain sensitive to contemporary intelligence operations. The Finnish airliner carried American diplomat Henry W. Anthal Jr. and 500 pounds of diplomatic pouches evacuated from U.S. embassies in Tallinn and Riga as Soviet forces prepared to annex the Baltic states. This setting represents the intersection where buried history meets modern geopolitics, creating situations where 84-year-old secrets threaten current international relationships that depend on concealing wartime intelligence operations and betrayals that shaped the Cold War's foundation. Maria specialized in maritime archaeology after completing her doctorate at University of Helsinki, focusing on World War II shipwrecks that revealed untold stories about wartime operations in the Baltic region. Her academic interest in the Kaleva incident began as historical research, but evolved into professional obsession when archival documents suggested the crash involved more than routine diplomatic evacuation. Her diving expertise and linguistic skills enabled access to Estonian, Finnish, and Russian archives that revealed discrepancies in official accounts of the aircraft shootdown. Maria's reputation for meticulous research attracted funding from heritage organizations seeking to document Baltic maritime history during the war that shaped modern European boundaries. Maria leads Estonia's underwater archaeological survey team while consulting for international organizations investigating wartime incidents that remain politically sensitive despite decades of elapsed time. Her security clearance enables access to classified archives, while her academic credentials provide cover for research that intelligence agencies monitor but cannot officially suppress. The Kaleva project received government funding through cultural heritage programs, though recent interference suggests contemporary political interests in limiting discoveries that could embarrass current allied relationships. Maria's investigation combines legitimate archaeological methods with intelligence analysis that her background enables, but her academic position officially prohibits without proper authorization from multiple international agencies. Despite her academic role, Maria possesses investigative instincts and analytical capabilities that enable recognition of intelligence patterns and cover-up techniques that most archaeologists would dismiss as bureaucratic confusion rather than deliberate concealment. Her greatest strength is applying historical methodology to contemporary intelligence analysis, detecting deception spanning decades while maintaining scholarly objectivity, despite personal danger that her discoveries create. Maria's linguistic abilities enable access to multiple national archives, while her diving expertise provides technical capability for recovering evidence that land-based historians cannot access through conventional research methods requiring surface-based investigation rather than underwater archaeological recovery techniques. Maria must navigate academic investigation of historical aircraft while managing contemporary intelligence interference that seeks to prevent recovery of diplomatic documents whose contents could destabilize current international relationships built on concealing wartime betrayals and operations. The primary obstacle is institutional pressure from multiple governments whose intelligence agencies prefer keeping Kaleva's secrets submerged rather than allowing archaeological recovery that could expose wartime operations still affecting contemporary diplomatic relationships and intelligence cooperation agreements. The stakes involve both historical truth and international stability. Maria's archaeological work could vindicate victims of wartime betrayal while providing closure for families, but revelation might also compromise ongoing intelligence operations or embarrass agencies whose wartime mistakes enabled enemy penetration that influenced Cold War developments. This conflict represents the challenge facing researchers whose historical investigations intersect with classified operations requiring contemporary protection despite changing security requirements that make decades-old secrets politically rather than strategically sensitive. Maria's discovery of Kaleva's wreckage culminated years of research into the mysterious shoot-down that had claimed 9 lives, including American diplomat Henry Antheil Jr., whose evacuation mission from the Baltic embassies carried intelligence that Soviet forces were desperate to intercept before it reached Washington. Finally found her, Maria radioed to surface support while her ROV's cameras revealed the remarkably preserved Junkers Jew. 52 aircraft resting upright on the Baltic seabed, its cargo compartment still sealed despite 84 years of submersion in the cold, oxygen-poor waters. The archaeological project had attracted international attention from heritage organizations seeking to honor victims of the first Allied casualties in what would become World War II, though recent inquiries from unnamed government officials suggested contemporary interest beyond academic research. Estonian diving company Tukritude OU provided technical support for the expedition, while Maria's team documented the wreck site using advanced underwater survey equipment that revealed structural details contradicting official reports about the aircraft's destruction by Soviet fighters. "Those diplomatic pouches are still intact," Maria observed while examining cargo compartment imagery that showed leather document cases apparently preserved by the Baltic's unique environmental conditions, creating unprecedented opportunity for recovering classified diplomatic correspondence from the critical period when Stalin prepared to annex the Baltic states. The discovery had evolved from historical research to potential intelligence recovery requiring careful handling to prevent international complications while preserving archaeological evidence that families deserve to have returned after decades of uncertainty. Maria's approach to recovering Kaleva's contents required balancing archaeological protocols with potential intelligence sensitivities, utilizing proper documentation procedures while preparing for government interference that historical precedent suggested would materialize once authorities learned about diplomatic document recovery. Her methodology emphasized complete photographic documentation before physical recovery, creating permanent record of wreck site conditions while ensuring that any subsequent government seizure of materials couldn't eliminate evidence of archaeological discoveries that international law protected under maritime heritage conventions. Most critically, Maria prepared legal frameworks for protecting recovered materials through Estonian cultural heritage laws, while coordinating with Finnish authorities whose citizens had operated the aircraft and whose government maintained official interest in resolving the 84-year-old mystery. Her team included maritime lawyers familiar with international salvage law and diplomatic immunity issues that might affect ownership of classified documents recovered from international waters, requiring careful navigation of competing legal jurisdictions and government claims. Maria also prepared secure storage facilities for recovered materials, while establishing communication protocols with media outlets that could publicize discoveries before government suppression eliminated public awareness of archaeological findings requiring protection through international attention. Her coordination with Estonian National Heritage Board provided official legitimacy for recovery operations, while her academic credentials enabled access to international archives that would contextualize whatever intelligence the diplomatic pouches contained. Maria's initial recovery operations focused on documenting Kaleva's condition while assessing the feasibility of retrieving diplomatic pouches without damaging their contents after 84 years of submersion in Baltic waters that had remarkably preserved organic materials. Water temperature and low oxygen created perfect preservation conditions. Maria noted while examining cargo compartment images showing leather diplomatic cases apparently intact despite decades of submersion that should have caused significant deterioration. The wreck site revealed evidence contradicting official Soviet reports about the shootdown, with impact patterns suggesting controlled ditching rather than catastrophic destruction by fighter aircraft, raising questions about whether Anthale had survived the initial crash. Marine forensics expert Dr. Eric Lindqvist joined the expedition to analyze human remains that sonar had detected within the aircraft, potentially enabling identification of victims whose families had never received closure about their loved one's fate. Those pouches contained documents that multiple governments tried to recover during wartime. Lindqvist observed while reviewing historical records showing repeated Soviet submarine searches of the crash site immediately after the incident. Intelligence historian Professor James Harrison provided consultation about potential contents of diplomatic correspondence evacuated from U.S. embassies in Tallinn and Riga, warning that recovery could trigger contemporary government intervention if documents revealed operations affecting current international relationships. Maria's recovery of the first diplomatic pouch revealed documents written in codes that her linguistic expertise couldn't decipher, indicating intelligence communications requiring specialized analysis, while her archaeological team faced increasing surveillance from unidentified vessels monitoring their salvage operations. Estonian maritime authorities reported foreign naval activity in the area, while international heritage organizations received inquiries about the Kaleva project from unnamed government officials claiming security concerns about sensitive historical materials requiring special handling. The recovered documents showed water damage, but remained largely legible, containing references to Operation Baltic Shield and other wartime intelligence programs that historian consultation suggested involved Allied penetration of Soviet operations during the period when Stalin prepared to annex the Baltic republics. Investigation intensified when document translation revealed that Antheil had been carrying intelligence about Soviet infiltration of Allied diplomatic missions, including evidence that Stalin's government had agents within British and American embassies providing information about evacuation procedures and personnel schedules. Professor Harrison's analysis indicated the diplomatic pouches contained proof of systematic intelligence failures that had enabled Soviet interception of Allied communications throughout the Baltic region during the critical months before annexation. Contemporary government pressure escalated as multiple intelligence agencies claimed jurisdiction over historical documents whose contents could embarrass current Allied relationships, built on concealing wartime intelligence failures that had compromised operations throughout Eastern Europe, affecting Cold War development. The situation reached crisis when Maria discovered Antheil's personal diary, documenting his knowledge of a high-level intelligence officer codenamed Raven, who had provided Soviet forces with detailed information about Allied evacuation plans, enabling the perfectly timed fighter interception that had killed all 9 people aboard Kaleva. Contemporary threats against Maria's team indicated that powerful interests remained committed to protecting identities revealed in 84-year-old intelligence documents, while government agents attempted to seize archaeological findings before public disclosure could expose systematic betrayal that had shaped wartime operations and subsequent Cold War intelligence relationships that modern agencies preferred keeping classified despite historical significance. The Kaleva recovery attracted attention from intelligence agencies whose monitoring of Maria's archaeological work indicated concerns about exposing wartime operations that contemporary security relationships might still depend upon for maintaining international cooperation agreements that classified information protection required. Multiple foreign vessels began operating near the wreck site while claiming to conduct routine naval exercises that Estonian authorities recognized as intelligence gathering rather than legitimate military training that would normally occur in designated maritime zones. "Your archaeological project is drawing dangerous attention," warned American cultural attaché Robert Chen, while suggesting that Maria limit document recovery to avoid creating diplomatic complications with allies whose wartime cooperation might be compromised by revelations about intelligence failures. International maritime law experts noted unusual government interest in civilian archaeological operations, indicating potential conflicts between heritage protection and national security claims that could terminate recovery before historical evidence reached appropriate academic analysis. Media outlets reported increased naval activity around the wreck site, while government spokespersons dismissed public curiosity about routine archaeological documentation that official sources claimed held no contemporary significance despite obvious security concerns. The convergence of international surveillance, diplomatic pressure, and legal challenges created operational environment where Maria's archaeological work faced systematic opposition from institutional interests whose contemporary authority depended on maintaining wartime secrets regardless of historical value or family closure needs. Facing government interference while managing archaeological responsibility to historical truth tested Maria's ability to maintain academic objectivity while pursuing recovery that could provide closure for families while potentially destabilizing international relationships built on concealing wartime intelligence failures. The pressure forced Maria to confront institutional loyalty against personal moral obligation to expose betrayal that had cost Allied lives while protecting intelligence operations that continued benefiting from concealment of systematic failures enabling enemy penetration. Her response to escalating threats revealed character development through academic service. She maintained scholarly methodology while seeking truth, applied rigorous documentation standards to politically sensitive findings, and prioritized historical accuracy over institutional convenience when government pressure attempted to suppress archaeological discoveries. The confrontation crystallized Maria's understanding of academic responsibility. Researchers sometimes must choose between institutional approval and historical truth. While individual scholarship could threaten collective narratives that contemporary politics required for maintaining international stability. Maria's archaeologist identity strengthened under pressure, proving that duty to historical truth transcended government authority. When evidence revealed systematic betrayal that academic integrity demanded exposing despite potential diplomatic complications. Her research training provided methodology for exposing cover-ups, while her international credentials ensured persistence despite pressure to abandon investigation that powerful interests preferred to keep submerged permanently rather than allowing historical accountability. As Maria's document translation revealed evidence of wartime intelligence betrayal, while contemporary officials worked to suppress archaeological findings, the situation approached confrontation where historical truth would conflict with diplomatic stability that powerful interests were prepared to protect through elimination rather than exposure. Her discovery of Raven's identity created immediate threat to intelligence networks whose contemporary authority depended on concealing systematic wartime failures that had enabled Soviet penetration of Allied operations throughout Eastern Europe, affecting Cold War development. The investigation had uncovered evidence that wartime betrayal continued through post-war intelligence agencies where original conspirators had systematically eliminated witnesses, while building careers on concealing collaboration that had cost hundreds of Allied lives. International cooperation provided legitimacy for archaeological recovery that individual governments couldn't terminate through national pressure, creating diplomatic complications for resolution that would either expose systematic betrayal or eliminate investigation before evidence could reach public attention. Contemporary threats against Maria's family indicated that institutional protection of wartime secrets extended beyond professional discouragement to active elimination of threats to careers and relationships built on concealing intelligence failures that modern agencies preferred keeping classified permanently. The convergence of historical evidence, contemporary cover-up, and international attention created perfect conditions for confrontation where archaeological truth would meet systematic institutional resistance prepared to use ultimate force for protecting diplomatic secrets. Maria's archaeological investigation shattered completely when document analysis revealed that Sir Charles Whitmore, the wartime intelligence officer codenamed Raven, had not only survived the war, but had built a distinguished career in NATO intelligence while continuing to provide classified information to Russian successors of his original Soviet handlers. Whitmore runs counterintelligence oversight for the alliance. Professor Harrison realized while reviewing Anthal's diary entries that documented systematic betrayal of Allied operations through intelligence officer who had achieved positions enabling him to compromise contemporary NATO operations while investigating threats to his network. The situation exploded into immediate crisis when Maria's discovery triggered assassination attempts against her archaeological team, indicating that Whitmore's network retained operational capability for eliminating witnesses to systematic betrayal that had continued throughout the Cold War into contemporary counterterrorism operations. He's been selling NATO secrets for 84 years, Dr. Lindqvist confirmed during emergency meeting while explaining how Anthal's documents proved systematic intelligence collaboration that had enabled Soviet interception of Allied operations while protected traitor-built career investigating security breaches he personally facilitated. Maria faced complete breakdown of official support as government authorities received pressure to terminate archaeological project that threatened to expose systematic intelligence failures extending from World War II through contemporary NATO operations that Whitmore's network had compromised for decades. This isn't just about historical aircraft anymore, warned Estonian security chief when government agents attempted to seize recovered documents. Whitmore's betrayal has compromised ongoing operations throughout Europe. Exposing him could destabilize Allied intelligence cooperation while triggering purges that would cripple NATO effectiveness. The crisis transcended archaeological discovery to involve international security implications, where revealing historical betrayal could compromise contemporary operations while concealing it enabled continued enemy penetration of alliance intelligence networks that Whitmore controlled through positions that institutional trust had protected. Standing in secure facilities surrounded by government agents demanding surrender of archaeological findings, Maria confronted fundamental choice between academic truth and international stability that revealing Whitmore's network could destroy, despite exposing systematic betrayal that had compromised Allied security for generations. The safe choice was accepting official compromise transfer recovered documents to appropriate intelligence authorities while receiving academic recognition for historical discovery, enabling institutional face-saving while preventing disruption of NATO relationships that intelligence cooperation required. But Maria realized that government protection of Whitmore enabled continued betrayal that threatened current Allied personnel while dishonoring every service member whose sacrifice had been compromised by systematic collaboration that official secrecy had enabled rather than prevented. If I surrender these documents, Whitmore continues selling NATO secrets while Anthal's murder remains unpunished. Maria thought while processing government ultimatum demanding termination of investigation that threatened contemporary intelligence relationships. Her decision crystallized around academic duty. Allied personnel and historical victims deserved protection from systematic betrayal that institutional cover-ups had enabled for decades, while Anthile's sacrifice demanded justice that diplomatic secrecy had prevented through protecting traitors rather than honoring victims. The ultimate stakes transcended historical research to involve Allied security, whether systematic betrayal would continue through institutional protection of compromised personnel, or whether exposure would enable security reforms that prevented future collaboration despite short-term disruption of intelligence relationships. Maria's choice would determine not just Anthile's posthumous vindication, but broader Allied security against enemy penetration that institutional protection of failure had enabled through decades of concealment rather than accountability, that systematic reform required for preventing continued intelligence losses. Maria made the choice that would end her academic career while potentially saving NATO intelligence operations complete exposure of Whitmore's network. Despite government pressure to protect wartime secrets that contemporary security supposedly required maintaining through continued classification. "I'm releasing everything to international media," Maria announced, while coordinating with journalists that Estonian authorities had contacted to ensure evidence reached public attention before elimination teams could suppress archaeological findings threatening institutional secrecy. Her transformation from academic archaeologist to intelligence whistleblower created immediate breach with government sponsors while enabling public exposure of systematic betrayal that official channels had refused to address through internal accountability processes. But Maria's revelation required sacrificing career and personal safety to protect Allied personnel from continued betrayal that Whitmore's network enabled through positions that institutional loyalty had placed beyond suspicion despite decades of intelligence failures. Anthile's documents prove 84 years of systematic betrayal, Maria explained during coordinated media release. Protecting institutional reputation enables continued enemy penetration that costs Allied lives while dishonoring every service member whose sacrifice has been compromised by collaboration that diplomatic secrecy protects. Maria's courage in choosing truth over institutional loyalty had begun process that would either reform Allied intelligence or destroy her life through retaliation against archaeological discovery that threatened powerful networks built on concealing systematic betrayal. As assassination teams closed in, while Maria coordinated international media exposure of Whitmore's network, she prepared for confrontation that would either vindicate Anthile's sacrifice or eliminate the last witness to systematic Allied intelligence betrayal spanning nearly a century of enemy collaboration. Her documentation strategy required simultaneous release across multiple countries to prevent suppression through diplomatic pressure, while Estonian protection enabled media coordination that NATO authorities couldn't terminate through military channels or intelligence community influence. Whitmore's network includes personnel throughout Alliance intelligence. Maria briefed international journalists while providing classified evidence that proved systematic collaboration dating from 1940 through contemporary NATO operations that enemy penetration had compromised systematically. Europol investigators coordinated law enforcement response that would arrest conspiracy members before they could eliminate evidence or flee to non-extradition countries that might protect wartime collaborators whose contemporary value had enabled decades of impunity. Professor Harrison provided expert testimony documenting systematic intelligence failures, while Dr. Lindqvist offered forensic evidence proving that Antheil's aircraft had been deliberately targeted based on intelligence that only Allied personnel could have provided to Soviet forces. The media exposure required careful timing to maximize impact, while minimizing opportunity for network suppression through institutional pressure that Whitmore's influence throughout Allied intelligence could mobilize against investigation, threatening decades of profitable collaboration. The moment before coordinated international exposure created electric atmosphere as Maria's evidence prepared to shatter institutional protection that had enabled Whitmore's network to compromise Allied intelligence while building distinguished careers on concealing systematic betrayal of NATO operations. 84 years of intelligence failures end today, Maria announced, while media outlets throughout Europe and America prepared simultaneous release of classified evidence that proved wartime collaboration had continued through contemporary alliance operations that enemy penetration had systematically undermined. Whitmore's network began implementing elimination protocols designed to destroy evidence while neutralizing archaeological team, but international coordination prevented suppression through single-nation pressure that might have terminated exposure before public attention could ensure accountability. Estonian authorities arrested conspiracy members, while international media released documented evidence of systematic collaboration that had cost thousands of Allied lives through operations compromised by intelligence betrayal that institutional protection had enabled rather than prevented. Henry Antheil died because Allied intelligence protected traitors. Media headlines announced, while public attention focused on systematic failures that diplomatic secrecy had concealed through decades of institutional loyalty to personnel whose collaboration had never ended. The convergence of international media attention, law enforcement coordination, and public outrage created perfect conditions for exposing institutional betrayal while protecting archaeological team from elimination attempts that network desperation had triggered. Maria's coordinated media release created immediate international crisis as evidence of Whitmore's systematic collaboration exposed Allied intelligence failures spanning from World War II through contemporary NATO operations that enemy penetration had compromised through protected personnel networks. Sir Charles Whitmore has been selling Allied secrets to Russian intelligence for 84 years while investigating and eliminating threats to his collaboration network, Maria announced during press conference while providing classified documents that proved systematic betrayal of NATO personnel, including modern operations. Her revelation triggered immediate law enforcement response as European authorities arrested conspiracy members whose contemporary positions had enabled decades of intelligence collaboration that institutional protection had concealed through classification and career advancement for personnel whose loyalty had never been properly verified. Henry Antheil's murder was first in systematic elimination of witnesses to Allied intelligence failure. Maria continued while documenting how wartime cover-up had evolved into contemporary conspiracy that continued compromising NATO operations through protected collaboration networks. International media response created unprecedented exposure of intelligence community failures, while public pressure demanded accountability for institutional protection of systematic betrayal that had undermined alliance security throughout multiple conflicts and contemporary operations. Maria's exposure created immediate complications as Whitmore's network implemented desperate measures to eliminate evidence, while intelligence agencies throughout NATO faced crisis of confidence that threatened alliance cooperation during ongoing operations requiring mutual trust and information sharing. Exposing systematic betrayal undermines Allied intelligence relationships, argued NATO officials, while attempting damage control that would preserve institutional credibility. Despite evidence of decades-long enemy penetration through protected personnel networks that security oversight had failed to detect. Whitmore's arrest triggered international investigation of intelligence failures, while Allied governments faced pressure to review personnel whose careers had been built on concealing collaboration that continued compromising contemporary operations through enemy access to classified NATO information. European law enforcement discovered extensive evidence of systematic intelligence sales, while American authorities found documentation proving that Whitmore's network had compromised operations throughout the Cold War and into contemporary counterterrorism efforts that enemy knowledge had systematically undermined. The international crisis required careful management as Allied intelligence agencies implemented security reforms while maintaining operational capability during transition that enemy governments might exploit through remaining collaborative networks that investigation had not yet identified or eliminated completely. The climactic confrontation occurred when Whitmore, facing arrest and international exposure, attempted final elimination of evidence and witnesses, while claiming patriotic duty to protect institutional stability, despite documented systematic collaboration with enemy governments. I protected Allied interest by preventing exposure of intelligence methods that enemy knowledge would compromise, Whitmore declared during interrogation, while investigators presented evidence of 84 years of systematic betrayal that had cost thousands of NATO lives through operations his collaboration had compromised. Maria's testimony provided definitive proof of Anthial's deliberate murder, while documenting how institutional protection had enabled continued collaboration that threatened contemporary Allied personnel through systematic enemy penetration of intelligence networks that diplomatic secrecy had preserved rather than reformed. Henry Anthial died protecting intelligence that could have prevented Soviet infiltration. Maria testified while explaining how Whitmore's betrayal had served multiple enemy governments while building distinguished career on concealing collaboration that had never ended despite changing international alignments. International prosecutors presented comprehensive evidence of systematic intelligence failures, while public pressure demanded accountability for institutional protection of betrayal that had undermined Allied security throughout multiple conflicts and contemporary NATO operations that enemy knowledge continued compromising. The moment represented complete vindication of Maria's archaeological investigation while exposing systematic institutional failure that had protected collaboration rather than alliance personnel whose lives had been compromised by betrayal. That official oversight had failed to detect or prevent through appropriate security measures. Maria's successful exposure of Whitmore's network created systematic reform of Allied intelligence while achieving posthumous justice for Antheil through recognition that diplomatic secrecy had prevented for decades of concealment and collaboration. Her evidence enabled prosecution of systematic betrayal while triggering security reforms that protected NATO personnel from continued enemy penetration through collaborative networks that institutional loyalty had inadvertently preserved rather than eliminated through proper oversight and accountability measures. Henry Antheil's sacrifice finally receives appropriate recognition. Alliance officials announced while awarding posthumous honors that acknowledged his heroic service during intelligence mission that enemy betrayal had compromised through collaboration that institutional protection had concealed. The breakthrough extended beyond individual justice to institutional accountability, as Allied intelligence agencies implemented comprehensive security reforms that prevented future collaboration while maintaining operational effectiveness despite transition disruption that enemy governments attempted to exploit through remaining networks. Maria's transformation from academic archaeologist to international whistleblower proved that individual courage could expose systematic institutional failure while protecting contemporary NATO personnel from continued betrayal that diplomatic secrecy had enabled through misguided loyalty to compromised networks. Maria's revelation triggered comprehensive Allied intelligence reform, while Whitmore's prosecution exposed systematic collaboration that had compromised NATO operations for 84 years through institutional protection of betrayal, rather than alliance personnel whose security had been sacrificed. Antheil received posthumous Intelligence Star, while Baltic diplomatic evacuation gained recognition for heroic service that enemy collaboration had attempted to conceal through systematic elimination of witnesses and evidence destruction. Most importantly, Maria's courage in exposing institutional betrayal protected contemporary NATO personnel from continued enemy penetration while proving that archaeological discovery could achieve justice when diplomatic secrecy protected collaboration rather than legitimate security interests, requiring appropriate accountability reforms. Maria's exposure of Whitmore's network triggered immediate Allied intelligence reform as systematic collaboration spanning 84 years required comprehensive security review and personnel investigation that revealed extensive enemy penetration of NATO operations through protected collaborative networks that institutional oversight had failed to detect. Sir Charles Whitmore received life imprisonment, while his conspiracy members faced prosecution throughout Europe and America, creating precedent for accountability that institutional protection had previously prevented through classification and career advancement for compromised personnel whose collaboration had continued unchecked. Henry Antheil received posthumous Congressional Gold Medal, while the Baltic diplomatic evacuation gained official recognition as heroic intelligence mission that enemy betrayal had compromised, validating decades of family belief in his service despite institutional concealment of his sacrifice. Allied intelligence agencies implemented comprehensive security reforms while maintaining operational effectiveness during transition that required careful management to prevent enemy exploitation of temporary vulnerabilities that organizational accountability had created through necessary justice measures. Maria's archaeological discovery influenced international heritage policies, while demonstrating that historical research could expose contemporary security threats when institutional secrecy protected collaboration rather than legitimate alliance interests requiring appropriate protection. 2 years later, Maria's influence on Allied intelligence extended throughout NATO as her investigation became template for identifying and eliminating enemy penetration networks. That institutional protection had inadvertently preserved through misguided loyalty to compromised personnel whose collaboration had spanned generations. The Korhonen Protocol became standard security procedure for investigating historical intelligence failures while preventing contemporary repetition through comprehensive personnel review and accountability measures that Maria's evidence had proven necessary for maintaining alliance security against systematic infiltration. Her exposé influenced international intelligence cooperation while demonstrating that transparency could strengthen rather than undermine Allied relationships. When systematic accountability eliminated enemy penetration, that secrecy had inadvertently protected through institutional loyalty to collaborative networks. Henry Anthiel Memorial Foundation supported families of diplomatic personnel whose service had been concealed or compromised by systematic betrayal, while Maria's advocacy ensured appropriate recognition for classified missions that institutional secrecy had previously prevented from receiving deserved honors. The case influenced international maritime archaeology while proving that historical investigation could expose systematic institutional failure when official oversight protected collaboration rather than legitimate security interests requiring appropriate accountability and reform measures. Maria evolved from academic archaeologist to recognized intelligence reform advocate whose successful exposure of systematic collaboration validated historical truth while protecting contemporary NATO personnel from continued enemy penetration through compromised networks that diplomatic secrecy had enabled. Her transition from university research to international consulting enabled continued service, while her expertise in exposing institutional betrayal benefited Allied security throughout organizations requiring reform to prevent collaboration that official protection had inadvertently preserved. Truth serves security better than secrecy that protects betrayal. Maria often explains during NATO training programs. Accountability strengthens rather than undermines alliance credibility. When systematic reform eliminates enemy penetration that misguided loyalty has enabled through institutional protection. Maria's story proves that archaeological discovery can expose contemporary security threats when historical research challenges institutional secrecy, protecting collaboration rather than legitimate alliance interests, while demonstrating that academic courage and international cooperation strengthens security through accountability that eliminates systematic betrayal rather than concealing it. Epilogue. Today, Dr. Maria Korhonen directs the International Intelligence Accountability Institute, where her discovery of Anthiel's classified documents revolutionized Allied security oversight while ensuring that wartime sacrifices receive appropriate recognition rather than institutional concealment. Her exposure of Whitmore's 84-year collaboration network led to comprehensive NATO intelligence reform that eliminated enemy penetration while maintaining operational effectiveness through accountability, rather than secrecy that had inadvertently protected systematic betrayal. Henry Anthiel's posthumous Congressional Gold Medal ceremony became international recognition of Baltic diplomatic evacuation while his documents now serve NATO training on recognizing long-term penetration networks that institutional loyalty can inadvertently protect. The Baltic Sea site, where Kaleva's wreckage was discovered, now hosts Allied Intelligence Memorial honoring diplomatic personnel whose classified sacrifice had been concealed by institutional protection of betrayal rather than appropriate recognition of heroism that deserved commemoration. Sir Charles Whitmore's conviction for systematic collaboration influenced international law regarding intelligence personnel accountability, while his network's prosecution demonstrated that enemy penetration could be eliminated through comprehensive reform rather than continued concealment that had enabled decades of NATO operational compromise. Maria's transformation from maritime archaeologist to intelligence reform advocate proves that academic courage can expose institutional failure while protecting contemporary alliance personnel from continued betrayal, demonstrating that historical truth serves security more effectively than diplomatic secrecy. When systematic accountability eliminates collaborative networks that misguided institutional loyalty had inadvertently preserved through classification and career protection rather than appropriate investigation and reform, that Anthiel's sacrifice had finally inspired through patient archaeological discovery that refused to let the Baltic Sea keep its deadly secrets buried forever beneath 230 feet of cold water that had preserved evidence of betrayal spanning nearly a century of enemy collaboration disguised as distinguished Allied service.